Hello everyone, very good afternoon. This is Priyal Bhatia, Chief Community Officer for DPO Club. Thank you for joining us for a webinar series by DPO Club on data breach reporting. Today we have some very esteemed panel with us who will be, shining the light on why data breach reporting is important, what are the key steps, and how we can first of all, have a mechanism where we can try and avoid data breach in the first place because definitely nobody wants to go through any kind of data breach in the industry. So today the session will be moderated by Colonel Vinod Koshi. He is the Vice President for Cyber Saro at Saro Consulting. Our speakers for the day would be Deepak Joshi sir here, who's CISO with a data privacy and security SME. And we have Shashank K, who's a co-founder at Redacto. So thank you, our speakers and moderator here for joining us today. It means a lot and all the support that we get from your end. Thank you so much. Before we move forward and start the session, I would request all the our attendees here to make this interaction as interacting as possible. This discussion as interacting as possible. So please feel free to drop your comments or any doubts that you have, and definitely in lieu of time, we'll try to address as many as we can. So thank you everyone, and over to you, Binod sir.
Okay. Uh, can we have the slide?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Welcome all the participants and a wonderful topic, and it is much relevant, especially in the present scenario of where we are with regard to data breach. Now, with regard to we will more concentrate on on the on the response part, that is actually to be, and how one can be prepared with respect to the data breach. Now, with regard to compliance aspect, there is a DPDP Act where one has to report a breach within a certain time period. As of now, it has been earmarked as, I think, about uh, yeah. Then comes the cert in reporting, where you have a cert India reporting, which gives us 6 hours of notice. There are further many more sectorial requirements. Like, for example, the Reserve Bank of India says that you have to report a breach in about 2 to 6 hours of detection. And then we have the IRDA, which says that you need 48 hours in the insurance sector. And with regard to the DPDP Act, we have 72 hours of notice that is there, essentially written part of the DPDP Act. However, most of you are aware that the rule is not yet in place, but once the rule comes into play, we will be more compliant. And I feel the privacy reporting will become a major aspect. Now, there is a very thin line between reporting a data breach and a privacy breach. Now, I assume that all data breach may entail, say, about 90% of them may entail a privacy breach. So hence, all these aspects need to be really looked after and be very particular about. Now, forget the cost of the breach that may happen with regard to the loss of reputation and things like that in your organization. It is but the regulatory aspect that becomes more important here, especially when you look at the DPDP Act, which has got a 250 crore fine. And then when you look at certain panel, they have their own arbitrary form of, if non-reported, they have another lot of penal deductions that happen alongside. In the case of Reserve Bank, if a Reserve Bank regulations, if a bank doesn't report a breach within 6 hours, their CRR or the cash reserves ratios are generally taxed, or are they come under a lot of um, scrutiny. And then subsequent to all this is the very fact that the organizations needs to prepare itself for a data breach per se. Forget the reporting aspects, that may still be, you know properly guidelined or properly earmarked. But when it comes to the aspect of the bounce back with regard to what an organization has to do within, so with me, I've got two very esteemed speakers, Shashank and Deepak. Both of them are, are stalwarts in their own field with respect to, and I'm very sure that in their working they would have come across this as a practical aspect, and the bounce backs, most of them have got both of them have got real industry experience and hands-on experience to actually handle this whole topic. So, Shashank, if I may kindly start with you, I would like to pose the first question to you. Shashank, am I audible, please?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, with regard to the first question to Shashank, can you briefly touch upon the proactive planning and preparation that is required to be done within an organization prior to, presumably assuming that there might be a breach that may take place, and that is part of our risk assessment and risk management and mitigation process. So, can you briefly touch upon the proactive planning and preparation or preventive actions that need to be done in an organization?
Sure. Thank you, DPO Club, for inviting me to share thoughts on this very particular important topic. And my greetings to both Vinod sir and Deepak sir. Very, very interesting question. Proactive generally isn't kind of a buzzword these days. It's also a factor of trust, also a regulatory imperative, right? So when if you ask me, proactive starts before even the first code commit happens to the GitHub, and it kind of extends till your real-time control frameworks. So technically, if I start peeling off the layers on how proactive works, the basic fundamental journey starts with understanding, the data flow. uh, who touches the data, where and why it goes, what are the different tags are enabled on this information, PII, PCI, financial telemetry if someone is in the BFSI industry, and also kind of understanding what regulatory color that data has at ingestion point. So kind of it sets up the data to be flying from ingress, egress, and egress. Another interesting events that are happening currently is in the age of AI is real-time threat modeling, where age-old days where we used to do a app-level security post deployments. Today, threat modelings are happening as and when the security engineers review the PRDs or the PRDs. If you take a very simple example, these days we can simulate attacks on, say, a Aadhaar based eKYC flow, or even an API which is kind of integrating with the CKYC. So what happens? You kind of proactively understand which is the weakest link, it's an overlooked webhook or a misconfigured IDP, and kind of start planning this. Another interesting piece of proactiveness is a very high level red team exercises which are happening, not just post facto pen testing, but kind of emulating adversaries in the real time. Uh, Example is either you do a credentials, stuffing attacks, or a mobile banking attacks using device fingerprinting, which is happening very common these days. And of course, not to ignore the third party, fourth party extended risk. All of these coming together whenever a vendor onboarding doesn't end with onboarding technically. Also understand the proactively what vendors are doing with the data, what has been their historical information. All of this club together kind of helps us to proactively plan, so that even before we start thinking of prevention, you have these design guardrails enabled inside the system.
Thank you very much, Shashank. You have actually articulated the fact that there is a habit and a hygiene that is there essentially within an organization. And also, you have highlighted the importance of exploiting the new technology of AI in all these aspects of data breach management, detection, and of course, responding to data breaches. Yeah. So with that, I'll come to the next question, which is also very important, and I think you are apt to actually answer this. Can you suggest some broad technology by virtue of your experience and your consulting, which you would have done, that can be incorporated ab initio to prevent, say, breach? Of course, the mundane aspects are still there. Something that you feel is of key importance that can be adopted in the present day scenario with respect to technology adaptation to prevent such breaches.
Sure, absolutely. I think before I take over the tech piece for first 10 seconds, I'll still say board level interventions, board level knowledges, having ample security champions inside the company, ample security investments in terms of either open source or vendor related tools, and having action triggered are still the top four requirements for any breach prevention. But going further, I think now, as and when AI and smarter LLMs are coming into play, of course, number one, SOAR is picking up. Uh, Companies have to are defining, enough playbooks kind of to automate trigger-based events, which the security tool can take care. Another major pillar which is coming up is uh, not only zero trust, but zero trust with microsegmentation. Imagine you have a banking setup, a BFSI setup, core banking, internet banking, analytics are different trust zones. So that means enabling or enforcing east-west traffic inspection or having Istio plus Envoy kind of helps. A very simple example we always used to take is that even if you are using a same VPC, the payments app pod and the marketing analytics pod, see that there is no lateral movement of data, or the DevOps team also is different. So having this, the first principle is number one. Second, of course, very strong identity and access fabric to be created across. One of a very interesting tool which I love that is something called typing DNA. What it does is basically creates a lot of behavioral analytics, biometrics, and kind of attaches that to your continuous authentication. So that means if someone is not typing the way they used to type, system will kind of create an alert and also go and block. Or another simple example is age old, the JITs for a privilege access. Of course, there is also the other side of the game where you can enable egress monitoring on your Kubernetes clusters, whatever data is going outside, understand who is consuming this data. Uh, Again, there are a lot of ifs and buts because egress monitoring also comes with a lot of cost. Security champions, privacy champions can actually talk to company, understand the costing aspects of that, because instead of doing a deep packet inspections, companies can actually understand where is the data going, who is consuming, and if there is a breach from even the vendor side also, technically you can immediately with an action cut the whole real-time data flow. And there are certain other aspects coming up like WAP, the web app API protection, which are giving your high tech velocity fintech APIs. Very simple example is that a lot of times third parties are also involved when you give your KYC check with DigiLocker. So when companies enable this WAPs, even if a webhook is created on those APIs, also company will get to know that real time this is happening. And last but not the least, the SBOMs of the supply chain security for every deployed microservices kind of have extensive use cases enabled, and see that everything is policy verified, every cluster is kind of signed off, so that one, there is no adversaries who can come inside, and second, even if someone comes inside in the real time, in a microsecond kind of concept, the playbook, that adversary can be kicked out. And all of these has to be fine tuned again without kind of giving a lot of cost to the company.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Shashank. You have summed up the whole thing in a very articulated and very nice form. One follow-up question with you. Now, what happens is enterprises, let's say, want to decide on inserting a security layer to probably avoid a breach or to protect oneself from breach. What happens is a large number of OEMs come up playing. One would say, I have this extra, that extra. So, with your experience, how do you actually evaluate a vendor or a particular product to get the best for the organization that one is within? I hope it's a
Absolutely, Ashik.
relevant question. I know I'm putting you a little bit to the.
No, no, no. I've been part of that journey where POCs play a very important role. And number one, and
Correct.
number two, team has to have a very clear cut clarity about what is the scope of the work they're expecting to end of the day. Every company has a user, has a champion, and has a budget approver. So when the three of them come together, then the kind of champion and the POC user kind of has to go and first understand whether every scope, what they have defined, what they want to achieve end of the day within KPI, is being taken care by the particular vendor or not. Number one. Number two, during POC again, you go and drive the best demo car possible, but only when you kind of use that in a real time basis only it gets to know. So Certain elements also which companies will take care when vendors come and give is like historical understanding, or how in depth the person who is kind of selling knows the problem statement in the first place. A lot of times it's that there can be a lot of sales jargons enabled, but company has to come over that and see that if they have written 10 different topics to be taken care, and out of 10, even if 8 to 9 are being solved as a real problem, then absolutely that's how they have to decide.
Okay. Thank you, Shashank. Well, we'll come back to you on a follow-up question later. But then I hope my audience are making notes of those valuable, golden words will not come back again. Shashank has given many of those aspects which are vital, and probably for young leadership, whatever he has said is to be noted and kept in your notebook. Okay. Now, thank you, Shashank. I follow up now to Deepak. Deepak manages one of the most critical infrastructures of our nation, and he's sitting at such a helm of affairs that he's part of the national critical infrastructure, and many of the banks and the BFSI sectors and many of the other financial sectors actually rely on Deepak's organization. Deepak, I am going to ask you, because you're from a quasi government organization. So I'll give you a little question that will have to rake up your mind and probably give us the answer. What are the nuances around legal and regulatory in the case of a data breach in India?
Sir, good evening to you, Priyal ma'am, and the audience who have taken out time, and to Shashank sir, who's been here. So, sir, the question which is there, that the nuances around legal and regulatory reporting in the case of data breach, this is a very relevant thing, sir, because as we see it today, it's a very, very complex thing, and it's already a chaos when you get a very small signature also of this kind of an activity, that it is happening. So if it happens full blown, or it is now confirmed that it is happening with you, so that becomes very, very chaotic, and you have to keep your nerves cool and contain the situation, while at the same time report it, so that similar incidents don't get reported across sector in India or elsewhere also. So first thing, what I feel is, sir, that prior to even coming into the legal and regulatory thing, you have to first carry out a very, very realistic assessment, unbiased assessment, and be very, very transparent, that whether there is a breach, if it is breach, then up to what extent you feel, and if required, you can take external help also, that what kind of people are affected, the numbers which are there, and then accordingly, based upon that, you can take a call as to how the reporting is to be done. Now you have said it specific to India, but in India also there are organizations which are doing business across the globe. So the reporting, in case it, like if we take the latest case wherein Marks and Spencer is undergoing some kind of cyber security incident, if we may call it today, but then the big Indian giant TCS is also getting involved in that. As to how the reporting is to be done, whether it is to be done as per GDPR, yes, of course it is to be done if it is Marks and Spencer. Then at the same time, since the company TCS is based in India, so how do we handle it here? And similarly, it is elsewhere also. So then we have to take care, and we have to be actually ready as to what all regulatory bodies and legal authorities come into play when it comes to reporting, because many of the times people don't get a very clear picture on this also, as to who all is to be reported. Then they start looking for the various forms prescribed by competent authorities and national level agencies, be it certain NCI, PC. If it's a regulated sector, then AIDI, RBI, SEBI, how to report, what time frame, because generally majority of them have the forms more or less similar, but the timelines differ, and certain details which are asked, they also differ, and a company may have presence across multiple sectors in case it is a big giant company. So that needs to be taken care. Then while we do this reporting to legal and regulatory bodies, the actual affected party, the data principal or data subject, if he is there, then how quickly he can be informed, so that he can prevent any loss of monetary value things, or otherwise his peace of mind can be assured. How can we inform him in the earliest time frame that what all safeguards he has to take in his day-to-day working, so that he gets saved? And then with that, sir, the most important thing is that we have to understand the difference between a cyber incident and a data breach. Once the DPDP comes full blown in India, there would be, I believe, some kind of chaos in between as to what all is to be reported under what. So that also the organizations need to clarify and be clear among themselves as to what will qualify to be a data breach. It shouldn't happen that a data breach is not reported, considering it to be only a cyber security incident or a cyber incident wherein PII data or human beings data or customers data is not involved. That is being reported as a data breach, creating panic all over. So that is my view on this, sir.
Right, got it. I'll dwell on a follow-up question later, but then I made one more question for you again around the aspect of your experience. I would request that you can give the answer by based on how your experiences, especially your defense service where you have handled such data breach incidents also. I want you to briefly touch upon the modalities of recovery, say post a data breach, and also dwell a little on the modalities or methodology of root cause analysis that is to be done, because I feel this is a very important aspect for a follow up learn up for that organization. So modalities of recovery post the data breach, and also a little bit on root cause analysis that is done based on incidents or based on a scenario. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Coming back again to the breach, first thing, that is the assessment, sir. So when we have assessed it and we are confirmed that it is a data breach, then the second question which comes is the severity of this particular data breach, and then accordingly the need to handle it, the manner in which it is desired to be. So when we speak of assessment of the breach severity, we need to understand the scope as to what was the scope of this particular breach, how many number of people have got affected, what all kind of data has been affected, what all problems can be created with this particular data which has been lost to these malicious actors. So that needs to be assessed first, sir, and then based upon that, we need to identify the reporting stakeholders which are there. There are internal stakeholders within your organization, the board and other people. Then you have external stakeholders. Then there are national level agencies. Then the most important, as I said, the customers who are there, they need to be told after the breach that this has happened and what all safeguards they need to take so that they are safe from any future activity which comes because of this particular breach. Then as an organization, sir, once this breach has happened, we need to learn the real lessons and incorporate them into our policies immediately so that we don't suffer a breach again. Because if it is an outcome of a cyber incident, then there is a likelihood when we come to the RCA, we will realize that maybe the vulnerabilities which cause this particular breach, they continue to be there in your ecosystem, and you continue the business again and you are stuck again. So whatever data was saved from not going out, that also goes out in the second instance. So you have to learn your lessons and incorporate them into your policies so that similar mistakes don't happen again. Update your policies, sir. When I say of updating the policies, it is primarily to strengthen the defensive posture which you have. You refine your procedures, you define what kind of training is required. If it is a phishing attack which has caused this kind of an activity, then you have a more number of phishing exercises for your people, because in the case which I said, Marks and Spencer and TCS, there is a likelihood of some kind of phishing or some sophisticated social engineering attack. So you similarly learn your lessons after the breach
Yeah.
and introduce more of that training. And similarly, if it is because of some internal tools which you were used, they were not patched, or it is because of the weakness which a
Hmm.
supply chain or a vendor has introduced into your ecosystem, you take care of that, and so on,
Okay.
sir. So this is,
I have a small follow-up question for Shashank actually on
sir.
what Colonel Deepak has explained. One of the most important aspect is a crisis management plan, among within the organization in case of a breach. Many small organizations can't afford to probably list out a crisis management plan or bring out a crisis man and then to adhere to it in its true spirit. So, what do you suggest in this aspect?
Yeah, very interesting question, and it's very practical to kind of know the answer. What we call a CCMP, right? Crisis Management Plan.
Yeah,
And
correct.
generally, big companies have a crisis management team which has a layering of different teams coming together who have notified people. So even if it's a 10 people company, for example, you need to have someone who will take ownership. That might be the CEO, that might be the CTO. Crisis management doesn't mean that you need to have a team of dedicated rooster on call people who will be there always. No, absolutely not. What it
Correct.
basically means that there has to be someone who is accountable, who is responsible to own things when something goes wrong, acts on it immediately, and also has authority to take calls.
Hmm. And
Either
I,
it
I
can be.
remember I remember that point which you mentioned that the board is also part of this whole drill.
Yes, yes. I think that was the first thing I did. Board
Yeah.
responsibility and intervention is everything to do with response to a disaster,
Okay.
because
Uh,
ultimately,
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go
breach.
ahead. Yeah.
Ultimately, if a breach happens, public is a public listed company, for example, board, executive management, everyone is held equal responsible. And
Yeah.
hence at a bigger companies, yes, everyone participates, there is a clear cut RACI matrix is written. But back to the original question, if it's a very small company, you did not have a day-to-day team, that team can own that responsibility. Either it's the CTO, CEO, or the even I have seen companies where the revenue heads take ownership of certain crisis management, because if there is a leakage, the first impact the phone call comes from a client is to revenue head only. They will not call to your CTO.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
totally depends, but it's totally doable.
Thank you. So, what the takeaway here is that the crisis management plan is mandatory irrespective of the size of the organization. But how do you go about doing it can be, delegated or can have a dedicated member, or it can be provided to a particular department. Deepak, by virtue of your military experience, I have a very, uh, what shall I say, a very micro question to you. Now, many of the root cause analysis entails digital forensics. Now, an organization like yours, I don't know if you have a forensic team within. What do you suggest for a MSME, for a medium enterprise, or for a large enterprises may have a forensic team. Now, what do you suggest for small organizations and medium enterprises?
Sir, it's a very expert field, as you are aware, and
Mhm.
merely buying some tools or having some ad hoc person won't suffice. It's better to rely on external agencies which are more sophisticated, because you buy a tool today, you would have that tool outdated tomorrow, the way things are progressing, the way attack vectors are progressing. So I don't think so, sir, that these SMEs and MSMEs can actually have a realistic forensic capability, going by the way the costs are involved, going by the way the technology changes and the expertise available in the market to operate these tools and to understand the nuances of the changing technology. So it's better to always, in such kind of a scenarios, report the incident, take help of either national level agencies or the agencies which are there commercially available, like say certain empaneled firms. Some of them would offer these kind of capabilities. AIRDAI has already mandated that insurance companies need to have some kind of forensic capabilities. So as you are saying, the organizations which are very small have very limited budget. I am really having my doubts whether they would be able to have a meaningful capability. So it's better to
Right.
actually rely on regulator, national agencies,
Yeah.
and then, sir.
Yeah. Wonderful. We are running short of time. I wish Priyal could have organized this for an hour, but with my wonderful panelists, I'm tempted to ask more questions. But I'll take one question from a participant named Shweta K. She's asking, Shashank, I'll direct this to you. How do the breach notification timelines and requirement under certain guidelines compared with those under the DPDP Act requirement? Yeah, Shashank, if you can.
My bad, I was on mute. So certain is pretty clear. Certain has already said
Yeah,
it's should be within 6 hours.
correct.
And I think DPDA has not mentioned. I have not read the DPDA clearly calls
72
out.
hours is what the DPDA says.
Yeah. My bad. I think that was GDPR. So I thought I read somewhere without undue delay. People have to say. And in terms of requirements, I guess it's very clear. Certain is very broad. Certain doesn't only mean data. Even if your process or your infra has been breached, everything has to be reported with a clear-cut notification to certain, because ultimately certain also talks to the industry to understand whether it's in real time or not. In terms of DPDA, it's very clearly called out about personal data, what has been breached, and then related to personal data, whatever information is available, which can be published, is what. So even the scheme, the scope of this whole requirement to be reported is kind of little bit nuanced. I'll not say narrow. It's very much nuanced for personal data, because the usage for this breach reporting, certain versus DPDA, is very much different on how it will go.
Okay. Shweta, with what Shashank has said has actually summarized the whole thing. But yet there is a caveat here. Sometimes what happens, there are sectorial organizations, or there might be a private. Let's say if you are part of Adani. Adani says, I need to be reported within an hour. So follow those guidelines that is entail part of your organization. However, in the case of Reserve Bank, they have their own timelines. In the case of IRDA, they have their own guidelines. Or there are a large number of other, like Power Grid, they say within 30 minutes. So these are not localized policies that exist. So the reporting is dynamic in those cases. However, what Shashank has mentioned is the DPDPA Act compliance as per what has been passed by the Parliament, and certain by the guidelines which was taken out in June 2022. Yeah.
Sir, I'll just add here that certain actually segregates the incident in terms of critical, non-critical. So it's not mandatorily 6 hours for everything which you are experiencing, and it is from the time you discover that it is an incident. So you have to carry out some kind of assessment prior to creating a panic, because it is prompt reporting is fine, but it should not be so prompt that you are not sure whether the incident is actually there or it's a false positive, and you end up creating a lot of panic among the industry. So you have
Yeah.
to assess it, and if you feel after some stage that it is a critical, you please inform it in 6 hours, else it is 24 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much, Shashank and Deepak. It was wonderful moderating both of you, and both of you are really knowledgeable to actually take on this session even longer. But I hope our audience have benefited by virtue of the experience which these two panelists bring in. And I was more glad in conducting this whole thing. Thank you, Priyal, and handing over back to you.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure, I think I, not being from this particular background, could also learn a lot. So I'm sure this was very helpful for our audience here. And thank you for your lovely insights. And it is always pleasure to, have everybody here participate with us and hear to such nice thoughts and insight and learning from everybody here. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to, more interactive sessions in the future.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
You
Thank you,
have a
sir.
great
Good day, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.